So welcome everybody to today's talk. I'm Johannes Bauer. I'm the director of the Queller Center at Michigan State University. It's my great pleasure today to welcome Milton Mueller, who at some level does not need an introduction because he has left such a big footprint in the field of internet governance and also in practice. But I'd like to say a few things about him. Your work, Milton, has always impressed me because it sort of combined in an extremely skillful way theoretical knowledge, deep insights from a political, economic, institutional, regulatory / governance perspective with practical work. I mean, Milton was, in addition to all his academic achievements, that includes writing sort of several of the books that have become classics in the field of internet governance. For example, Ruling the Root in 2002, that sort of described and analyzed the emergence of ICANN, one of the core institutions of internet governance, or his 2010 book Networks and States. He was also involved on the ground with ICANN. I mean, he was one of the co-founders of the non-commercial users constituency in ICANN. Served twice, I think, as its chair. Served in different steering committees of ICANN, and has orchestrated an academic community to focus in the Internet Governance Project and in GigaNet, one of the major international conferences that really sort of advances conceptual knowledge in addition to having a practical impact. So it's a great pleasure, Milton, to have you here. And his mind, I think, is always racing to the next topic. And today we have the pleasure to hear about the next topic, digitization and social control toward a cybernetic political economy. So welcome, Milton. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Johannes. And it's Johannes and I have been colleagues for a long time. I'm going to share my screen now. So yeah, Johannes mentioned internet governance, and I think the inspiration for a lot of this current work about digitization is that I was going to develop a new book or an entire online course about internet governance. And I realized that that was no longer the appropriate label for what I was interested in, because it really was becoming clearer and clearer that the internet was one part of a digital ecosystem that included all kinds of other things, in particular, what we're now talking about as artificial intelligence, and I would simply prefer to call software applications, and devices, and data governance. And so I began to broaden my concept of what was the institutional complex I was talking about. And then I became aware of the fact that many of the debates about public policy and the digital world revolve around issues that I can only call social cybernetic in nature. So what do I mean by social cybernetic in nature? Well, let's go back to Norbert Wiener and his original definition of cybernetics. He defined it as the science of control and communication in the animal and the machine. Note that he did not say the science of control and communication in society or the economy or politics. So one of the issues I'm going to raise today is how much can cybernetics tell us about social systems, and particularly because public policy is fundamentally about trying to steer or shape social systems. So by social cybernetic in nature, I refer to the ways digital technologies can be used to alter, control, and communication in social systems. And it's pretty clear that not only is that happening, but that is basically the main topic of so many of our policy debates currently going on. Just to go down the bulleted list here, we have the use of recommendation algorithms in social media. So these are variously accused of manipulating our minds or of polarizing American politics. And if one begins to investigate how this happens, one encounters the notion of deviation amplifying feedback, which is fundamentally a cybernetic idea. And we also want to know about how much of our economic activity or our infrastructural activity can be automated or turned over to AI and robots, and how this alters responsibility for control of these systems. So we're having debates about Tesla vehicles convincing their riders that they are automatic when they maybe are not quite as automatic as they used to be. And we're having some beginnings of some interesting debates about lethal autonomous weapon systems, which are all about who holds responsibility and control for these weapon systems. And then, of course, there is the controversies around digital currency, in which effectively you have the digitization of payment systems, and in some cases, the full digitization of currencies. And again, we're having debates about levels of control or loss of control, or how this should be regulated. And as this is happening, just to introduce some materialism for our materialists, if there's any out there, when you go down to the hardware level, we are now engaged in a geopolitical conflict over leadership in the manufacturing of digital technology. And they're becoming targets of industrial policy, protectionism, export controls, and national security restrictions, as governments come to see them as strategic and vital to their security. And the assumption is that these technologies deliver control. And if we do not lead the world in the production and utilization of these technologies, then we will lose control. So the relationship between digital technology on the one hand and political economic contestation over control becomes central to public policy discourse. Now let's look back for a moment. The scientific breakthroughs that gave rise to the digital world occurred in a remarkably short period of time, basically in the 1940s, around World War II. So we had Shannon's information theory happening in the mid-40s. We had Wiener's cybernetics. We had Turing's reduction of computation to an algorithm, which actually occurred in the 30s, but wasn't quite developed fully until John von Neumann came up with the stored program computing architecture of modern computers. And so these scientific breakthroughs all came together into a powerful combination that set in motion the digital revolution. Well, I shouldn't say digital revolution, because what I'm describing here is something that has been evolving and playing out gradually for 80 years. So today, we're all aware of the economic and significance and social significance of digitization, but what were people thinking at the dawn of the digital age? In his 1950 book, The Human Use of Human Beings, Norbert Wiener tried to grapple with the broader social implications of digital technology. He thought the implications were deep. With his cybernetics perspective, Wiener suggested that digitization doesn't just make pre-existing information and communication systems more technically efficient. He thought it struck at the very core of how society is organized and controlled. Cybernetics then went on to try to position itself as a general science. Ross Ashby, a British psychiatrist and student of the human brain, wrote that cybernetics is likely to reveal a great number of interesting and suggestive parallelisms between machine, brain, and society. Now note the combination there: machine, brain, and society. Machines are man-made. The brain is part of a living organism, a natural thing that we really still don't know how to build, but society is grouped in there too. So our social systems, by which we mean families, markets, governments, cultures, and languages, all the ways in which humans use each other, are these artificial or natural? And were the information scientists suggesting that their new field would enable scientific analysis of social systems? And if they were they aiming at something more ambitious, that is to say, technology of social organization? In other words, social engineering. Now, generally, if you do actually have a science, you are able to control natural forces through technologies that are based on that science. Now, it's clear that information theory, cybernetics, and computing gave us the technology to design and manage networks, robots, and information systems. But what about society? Asking that question, of course, raises bigger questions. If we do have a science of management and control, who is doing the managing and who is getting managed? How is this control exercised? How is it kept accountable? Most important of all, to what end is it directed? How are the goals and parameters of a social system set? And that, my friends, puts us in the realm of political economy. Those are the questions political economy is interested in. So one of my main themes in this talk is that we need to revive political economy as the underlying discipline supporting the theory and practice of public policy. Social systems are very different from animals and machines, but a cybernetic framework focusing on feedback, sensors, effectors, and their role in the control of systems might be able to improve our understanding of how policy interventions might help or hurt society, particularly in the context of the digitization of social control systems. In particular, both politics and economics can be characterized as control systems in the cybernetic sense. Note that control in cybernetics doesn't just mean hierarchical relations of coercion. For the most part, it refers to coordination, adaptation, and the maintenance of some kind of an equilibrium or homeostasis that allows a system to function. Coercion and hierarchy, however, are definitely elements of a social system. But cybernetics also calls our attention to notions of distributed control and systemic adjustments. So political science has corresponding notions of federalism and other structural means of distributing political power. Well, one reason I insist on reviving political economy is that politics and economics can be seen as structurally very different types of control. So market institutions can facilitate decentralized private exchanges, and they can coordinate these private exchanges. They give rise to money, credit, and the price system. Political institutions, on the other hand, facilitate collective choices, collective actions, and they institutionalize and regulate the exercise of violence. Now, both the political and the economic systems are interdependent. Markets rely heavily on a stable rule of law provided by government, while governments require the production of wealth to survive. Yet despite their interaction, the logic behind private choice and public choice are very distinct, and neither seems to be reducible to the other, although some forms of rational choice theory attempt to do that. Typically, I think they don't, or they need to continue recognizing this structural distinction between collective choice and private choice. So we have some kind of inherent bifurcation in our social systems. Well, despite their interdependence, and despite the pervasive presence in all of human history of markets, money, and banking on the one hand, and politics, the state, and institutionalized violence on the other, there is a scientific and normative gulf still between politics and economics. And so my hope is that some approach to social system cybernetics can provide the basis for a renewed political economy that can provide insights into the relationship between markets and states and practical policy guidance for the digital world. Now, let me illustrate the applicability of cybernetic systems thinking to society by discussing endogeneity. Early ideas about cybernetic control generally assumed that the people exercising control were outside the system. And this is the type of cybernetics that Norbert Wiener talked about, and it is called first-order cybernetics because of its limitation to the analysis of machines that are entirely built and controlled by humans. It is based on the model of a human building a machine, in other words. Now, to apply cybernetics to society, we have to have a second-order cybernetics that makes the controller or the exercise of control endogenous to the system. You can't steer society using some external mechanism as if the controller was some godlike creature that was not part of the system she is trying to manipulate, as if the reactions and unknown plans of other humans cannot affect the controller's exercise of control. So human controllers must be in the social system, not outside of it. And of course, they contend with billions of other humans in their exercise of control. And this notion of second-order cybernetics gets very philosophical and sometimes can lead down solipsistic rabbit holes. But on the other hand, I think it's a very important perspective to moderate our understanding of the notion of control in social science. And this is why I'm such a fan of Norbert Wiener's book title. The society is ultimately all about the human use of human beings. The great insight of political economy is that we use each other in both senses of the word. Use can mean beneficial cooperation, or it can mean exploitation and conflict in various shades of gray in between. So we need to recognize that the notion of social engineering makes other human beings the means to the ends of the engineers. So we're always asking whose ends, whose goals are going to be served. And in a social system, it seems like other people, not just the would-be social engineer, are trying to exert control and pursue their own ends. Every individual has autonomy. This again is second-order cybernetics. So institutions and public policy are conceived as sites of negotiation and bargaining, of struggles for control, a place where purposes coordinate, mix, conflict, and converge. And the bad news, I guess, for social science is that there is no predetermined outcome when humans use human beings. And digital technology does not get you out of this dilemma, it amplifies it. Because we have distributed technologies and control and cheapened them and scaled them up in ways that will have unpredictable results. Now, unfortunately, the rise of digital technology in the 20th and 21st centuries did not bring with it a highly developed digital political economy. We suffered from and continue to suffer from a disjointed economics and a disjointed political science. Early attempts to apply cybernetics to economics involve simplistic notions of central planning, such as Chile's Cinco or Oscar Long's Economic Cybernetics, published in 1970. These were all basically attempts to say you can have a technology and a social engineering of central planning in economics using cybernetic concepts. Now, Karl Deutsch, I guess he was a Hungarian scholar, moved to the United States, was influenced by Wiener, ended up as being a very prominent political scientist at MIT and the head of the APSA. He made a brilliant and very useful attempt to apply cybernetics to political science in his book, Nerves of Government, which was published in the mid-1960s. But again, it was only a political approach, applying concepts of steering and feedback and so on to government, but there was not really a cybernetic political economy. So I'd like to show, with the time left to me, how these ideas are applicable to a particular digital public policy issue. Due to time limitations, I'm just going to focus on one, and that is the regulation of AI applications. And this is a hot topic right now, of course. So AI is a cybernetic process. Obviously, it derives decision rules from digitized collections of data, and then feedback from the data and from human input is supposed to guide the decision-making, the automated decision-making process ever closer to the correct or desirable ones. But how much control and trust can be placed in this process, and what is the role of public policy in controlling these controllers? The first point I want to make is that it's a mistake to look at AI as a new technology or even as a distinct technology. It is, in fact, the product of the digital ecosystem. Norbert Wiener spoke of machine learning as part of a control system for anti-aircraft guns in the 1940s. The only thing new here is that AI applications are proliferating and more capable now. And why is that? Because they are riding on the back of a computational infrastructure that has been expanding in ubiquity and capability for the past 70 years. So the digital ecosystem starts with widely accessible, personally owned digital devices. These devices are networked, and the networks, of course, are increasingly interconnected and ubiquitous. And each network digital device can send data upstream to the many service providers and storage places with whom they interact. And of course, they can receive data downstream as well as along with their services. And the last component, software, consists of instruction sets that actively control the operation of the devices and networks according to rules that are programmed by a controller. And of course, they organize and process the vast aggregations of data produced by these interactions. So the use of big data and algorithms and AI cannot really be discussed usefully without situating it in this computational infrastructure. So a bit about algorithms. One of the key breakthroughs in the digital age was when Alan Turing worked out the math behind reducing any numerical calculation to a step-by-step set of instructions that could be followed without human thought. And this is what most of us mean by an algorithm now. An algorithm is a set of instructions for reaching a conclusion or accomplishing a task. Now, these instruction sets need not be confined to mathematical calculations. In human society, instruction sets can be and are used for many other purposes. For example, to renew your driver's license, there's a set of steps you must follow, which could be described as algorithms. The fact is, we have always been governed by algorithms. We call them organizational policies, bureaucracies, laws, regulations, social conventions, and codes of conduct. So let's call these social algorithms to differentiate them from the digital ones based on machine learning and digitized data. So this shift of perspective provides an important insight. Digitization isn't the thing introducing algorithms into social life. It's just a new method for producing and implementing them at scale and at a scope and scale that has never before been achieved. AI applications are a potential substitute or supplement for a vast number of social algorithms, whether you're talking about government, business, education, and medical practice. And this puts us in a better position to understand what is transformative about AI specifically and where policy interventions might be and might not be appropriate. So we have already mentioned the fact that attempts to shape society through policy are internal to a system and not external to it. Yet almost everything I read about law and public policy regarding AI starts from the premise that government is this external force that can just come in and fix any social problem that might arise through the use of AI, or that they can somehow command the technology to do the right thing, that we can somehow order developers to build ethics and correct decisions into their systems. Well, cybernetics gives us a much richer notion, but also a more ambiguous one of what regulation is. First, it locates the object of regulation within an interdependent set of systems. And second, and most importantly, it asks what homeostasis the regulations are aiming for. Regulation cannot mean that an omnipotent authority reviews all decisions and choices and has both the knowledge and the authority to tell us which one is right and which one is wrong in every possible instance. In a complex, large-scale society, regulation must mean that systemic relationships are controlled in a way that maintains an equilibrium through these feedback and sensing processes that must be ongoing. So one must be able to define what that homeostasis is and what feedback mechanisms, sensors, and effectors are required to maintain it. So let's consider the first point among these two bullets, that we must understand the interdependencies of the object of regulation. So as I've already explained, AI is a generic capability enabled by a globalized computational infrastructure that is vast and globally extended. Regulating AI effectively requires not just rules regarding what the code is or what it can do, but access to and the use of data resources it draws upon, the devices it operates on, and the networks connecting the algorithms to users and data sources. So as this computational infrastructure evolves, it will become less and less possible to isolate what is AI from the routine usage of this system. There are all kinds of automated decision-making processes that are increasingly built into it. I could be talking, for example, about the way in which algorithms recognize spam in email systems, or we could be talking about the way your word processing software tells you when you have misspelled a word, or when you're trying to voice activate a text message, the autocorrect feature. That's all networked AI, if you will. So any attempt to draw a clear legal or regulatory boundary around something called AI, I think, is bound to fail. An understanding of the interdependencies also highlights the internal contradictions in the social system. The same government that is maybe telling us through legislators or political response mechanisms that we need to protect ourselves from the ravages of uncontrolled AI is also providing massive subsidies to military and civilian research and development in AI, and telling us that a country's leadership in AI is important to its national security and its military strength. So there are competitive forces in there that might contradict efforts to control or limit AI. Now for the second point, what is the homeostasis sought by AI regulation? Most of the advocates of AI regulation that I have seen have no clue what their answer to this question is. They do not look at AI as an evolving set of software applications drawing on a digital infrastructure. They do not see it as something that can be and will be used across an incredibly diverse, heterogeneous, and unpredictable number of situations. They look at it as a thing, a static thing. The European AI Act, for example, tried to provide a definition of AI and then classifies its applications into 5 categories based on their risk level. This approach is based on a highly questionable assumption, namely that the risks posed by thousands or millions of applications coming into the digital ecosystem continuously can be known in advance and reliably sorted into these categories. American regulatory agencies' approaches can be just as poorly thought out. One proposed law, which hasn't gone anywhere, but it's interesting to read, it asks the Federal Trade Commission to, quote, promulgate regulations to require each covered entity to perform an annual impact assessment of their AI system. Note the singular word there, their AI system, as if there is a little box sitting there somewhere that is the AI system. The law requires them to consult with internal and external stakeholders while doing their impact assessment and attempt to eliminate or mitigate any negative impact on a consumer's life. Well, the reason I have Comcast up here on the slide is because this, to me, was an example of a really badly implemented AI system, although most of you might have encountered it as something more like what we used to call an AVR, or automated voice response system. So in my home here, just a few days ago, a tree fell on the power line coming into our house, and it completely severed our power and our cable. And so we tried to get in touch with Comcast to get this fixed. Seems like a pretty simple thing. Our line is down, please fix it. But their voice response system is sending you into an infinite loop in which it tells you to turn off your modem and reboot the system and then see if you have any problems, because they're convinced that most people have very simple problems that can be fixed by rebooting the system. And it was really complicated. It took me almost 35 minutes simply to get to the point where I could say, I need a technician to come out. The technician never knew why they were coming out. So what's the point here? The point is that this is an AI application, which is very badly done. But the point is, are you going to solve a problem like this by regulating the technology, by regulating the process by which AI is done, by classifying its risk level? I think that's kind of the wrong approach. We should be talking about whether the customer service of cable TV companies should be regulated, not about the generic technology. So next time you hear someone saying, we need to regulate AI, imagine someone saying in 1970, we need to regulate computers. Or maybe they were a bit sophisticated, a bit more sophisticated, and they said, we need to regulate computing. But what exactly would you regulate? What would be the goal, the desired homeostasis of regulating some generic thing like computing? And what would those regulations be like if someone had asked that in 1970 or later in 1980 or in 1990? I suspect that that question kind of answers itself. It's simply too generic. You don't really know what you're doing. So to wrap up, I hope no one confuses my exploration of the way cybernetics and system science might be applied to political economy with support for some kind of technocracy. It should be clear by now that I'm on the opposite side of that spectrum. I see AI and digital technology as controlled for humans and humans as fundamentally responsible for their regulation and control through institutions, through political economy. We will always need to ask who those users are, how distributed that control is, and how it is used. I think centralized organizational monoliths are often inefficient and will break down of their own accord. I support Schumpeterian notions of competition and innovation when it comes to digital technology. So political economy should seek a creative division of labor between collective action and private action, private exchange, between the market and the state, and how we handle new digitally enabled industries and capabilities will come through institutions, through protocols, through rules. And that will have a big impact on how prosperous, peaceful, and creative our global society is. The bedrock underlying such a division of labor, however, must be respect for the autonomy of the individual. So I look forward to your feedback, which I hope will not be deviation amplifying.
Well, thank you very much, Milton, for this fantastic tour de force on some issues that really are big challenges that society faces and that we all face in our own individual lives, and for this fantastic new perspective that you provide here.